Okay, hello everyone. It is 3:59. So I started the video a little bit early so we could get whomever on that's coming on. We'll give some folks a few more seconds to get on. Doesn't look like we have a excuse me, doesn't look like we have a list of questions today, so we'll take our time and get through this one. So I don't expect a long video today. So welcome back to Open Door at 4. It's that time when we hop on here and answer questions. So thank you for being part of the PeaceWorks ministry and family, and for participating in Q&As and events like this. So if this is something that you've benefited from as we've been answering questions a couple times a month, then a reminder that this is a common occurrence in the PeaceWorks University community, where we get more in-depth in our question and skill building once a month in an hour-long Q&A. So if this is something that would interest you, it's something that you're benefiting from, then I would encourage you to consider joining PeaceWorks University, where there's more more layers and more depth to it. But I am happy to serve you in this way if I can. So let's jump right into today's question. So it looks like on my list we just have one question for today. So if someone else has something, feel free to put it in the chat while I'm addressing the question that we have received. So it looks like there's a couple parts to it. So I'm going to read it and then try to unpack it. So, can you explain how to best support a victim when there is gaslighting involved as an abusive tactic? And so we'll need to unpack that language here in a minute. Most often, so here's the second part, I think, most often counselors, pastors, and people helpers fear to take a side when it's he said or she said. So actually, let me begin with the second part first. And I guess tie it to the question. So one of the best ways we can support a victim regardless when there is the presence of abuse is actually to not remain neutral. So the neutrality and the idea of, getting both sides, not picking a side, that actually benefits an abusive individual. So if there is abuse present, then neutrality or mutuality is what ends up happening. It ends up benefiting the abusive person. And so when we're aware that abuse is happening, that's why we recommend, when we become aware of abuse, that we're not recommending or continuing or engaging in marriage counseling. We're not bringing them both together. We're doing separate tracks of discipleship, separate tracks of care and confrontation, because we don't want to mutualize the problem. So right off the bat in the question, I think when pastors, counselors, and people helpers do that, there's a couple reasons why they do it. I think the most common is they're trying to help, and we tend to help in the way that we know how to help. And so obviously, because domestic abuse occurs in the context of marriage, we tend to see it as a marriage issue, or at the very least, we throw marriage-focused solutions at the problem. And as some of you who've been around and interacting with this work for a while, you know that marriage-focused solutions are impotent. They don't work in these cases because we're not dealing with a marriage problem. So I understand why people helpers go there. It makes sense, but remember, these are abnormal circumstances. So we're not about a marriage problem or addressing a marriage problem. We're addressing an abuse problem, a heart problem. And so certainly the he said, she said is not beneficial here. So I don't know if that is clear. I know what I'm saying is clear enough, but I don't know if that completely answers that portion of the question. But the reality is, you're right, many counselors, pastors, and people helpers mutualize when we really need to be aggressive in prioritizing our responses. So maybe that's a foothold for me. I was just doing an interview recently where we were talking about reconciliation. And that's like the first thing when people that are new to the work talk to me, pastors in particular. The question is, what about restoration and reconciliation? And I just think that is not the first question when dealing with domestic abuse. So if abuse has separated this relationship, if it's broken this relationship apart, then certainly reconciliation may need to be a conversation down the road, but it's probably not the first conversation. The first conversation in these cases is always safety. And then the second conversation can vary from victim responses to perpetrator accountability to transformation, depending upon what party you're working with and maybe what your skill set is. But I do find that most people really focus in on the marriage, and we love marriage, but actually I think we do marriage a disservice when we're neutral, because we've got to be very firm in safety and accountability, and those two things do not allow for mutuality or neutrality. They've got to be very firm paths, as it were, very firm and resolute directions. So the other part of the question was regarding gaslighting. So support when gaslighting is present. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, so gaslighting is just a term related to a movie, actually, but the best summary is probably another similar term, crazy making, which is gaslighting is a tactic used by an abuser to keep their victim unsettled. And you've heard it described as walking on eggshells, or this constant sense of uncertainty. Things could change at any moment, or the abuser will do things in the hopes that the victim will feel crazy or second guess themselves. And so it can be the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type stuff. It can be deliberate and intentional twisting of words and communication. Oh, I didn't say that. Of course I didn't say that. And, anything to construct within the victim doubt can be part of that process. And so gaslighting is very common, and a lot of victims are experiencing it. So the question is, best support when there's gaslighting involved. If you've got a person, a people helper who recognizes it, of course, I think the victim needs to be recognizing what's happening. Then for me, truth is always the combatant for deceit. And crazy making is a elaborate scheme of deceit, which is not being completely honest. And so I think you want to combat that with truth. When it comes to support, I think it goes back to those priorities I mentioned earlier, such as safety and accountability. You want to value the individual who's suffering, and you want to confront the sinful behavior of the one who is doing the crazy making. But what's so hard about that, let's be honest, is by the time a people helper is engaged, pastor, lay leader, even a counselor, or even a marriage and family counselor, sometimes even law enforcement, by the time a helper is engaged, the narrative has been built up by the abuser that she's crazy, and then two, it's been adopted in many ways by the victim, who begins to substantiate, yeah, I'm crazy, or acts in a way that displays that with desperation, which is understandable, right? Or really high ups and downs, also understandable. That's one of the interesting things. We won't get into it today, but something we talk about in Peaceworks University is, the impact of trauma and the ways in which people who are traumatized interact with the world. From the outside looking in, we would see it as odd, maybe dysfunctional, maybe crazy. But once you put the layers of what this person has experienced, it begins to make more sense. The dilemma is oftentimes, again, because we're wearing those marriage-focused glasses, those lenses in which we're seeing the problem, is what we see as a victim who is desperate, uncertain, frazzled, frustrated, confused, and we begin to feel sorry for the abuser because we haven't got all the pieces to see that in the gaslighting question, that he's the one, the abuser is the one who's creating that climate of uncertainty, fear, and threat. So I don't know. I hope that's helpful. That's kind of my best take, off the cuff at that. Yeah, I think that there's a fear piece in here too. The questioner is like that people helpers fear to take a side, and I think fear is a big part of that. And we've got to overcome that and really love people enough to be courageous, to stand up against wickedness and to care for those who are hurting. So that's the only question that we have today, which is amazing that that's the only one that we've got. So I'm going to stay on for another 5 minutes or so. If anybody else has another question, feel free to put that in the chat box. And while you're considering that, I want to remind you, if you're not in the loop, so I don't know how much overlap we have on the different resources that we provide, but if you've been listening to the Peaceworks podcast, which I would recommend to you, it's not the greatest quality podcast in the world. I have never been one to do things with excellence. I know that's a big thing in the church world, but I often joke that in a world of church excellence, I'm pastor good enough. So we do the best that we can with what we have, and the Peaceworks podcast is approaching 100 episodes. I think we're in the high 80s, low 90s right now, that area. But on that product, that service that we provide for free through Apple Podcasts or Google Play or through our website, we've been promoting an upcoming resource, another free resource that is available only through email. And so for those of you who are connected to us, you know that we are attempting to offer as much free content as we can. So we have the blog, we have the podcast, we have Open Door at 4, and now we're adding domestic abuse in the church, the workshop that'll be delivered by email only. So in order to be a part of that workshop, you need to sign up at chrismoles.org. There's it's right in the homepage, the upcoming workshop, Domestic Abuse in the Church, and it'll be a 4-part introductory workshop. And I think it not only could it be good for individuals who already interact with us online, but it would be a good reference for pastors, a good introduction, and then also a good introduction to what we do in Peaceworks University. So that's actually going to be beginning soon, October. We're going to be sending those out. We're going to be spreading those out and sending those via email. So if you'd be interested in that, absolutely free. You can sign up at chrismoles.org, and we would love to have more folks involved in that. And right now, I think we are over 700 folks are going to be attending that workshop, which for us is a really good number. And we'd love to see even more folks participate in that. Well, great. It's been good to be with you guys again and to share, answer, at least try to answer a question today. If you have any questions after the video is posted here, please feel free to put them in the comments. We'd be happy to backtrack and try to answer some of those and give you as much hope as possible, because there is hope. We got to put it in the right place. Our hope is in Jesus. We don't control outcomes. We can't control people for sure. We don't know if the people that we love will change, but we do know that Jesus is faithful, and we hope and pray that this type of interaction is helpful and hope-giving. Okay. Great. It's been great to be with you guys. Join us next time on Open Door 4. We do this every second and fourth, did I get that right? Thursday. And we love the time that we get to spend with you. So until next time, God bless.